and welcome to This Week in Metropolis. The transmission will begin shortly.
King P here,
And Stelio7.
and welcome to another episode of This Week in Metropolis. And it's a very special episode this week.
Again, we've got our favourite guest, because he's been our only guest so far on the show. Let's point that out.
But we liked it when he was on last time, so that's the important thing, isn't it?
Well, it went down okay. But he's back mainly because he wants a right to reply to our chat from last week. It's Mark. Mark, how you doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me back, and thanks for your kind words. Yeah, I'm pleased to be here.
Good. Well, we did bring up last week about
Yes, you did.
unsolved mysteries with regards to the episode relating to the UFO sighting in,
Which are actually, sorry to interrupt, but watching, we discussed before this, I watched a different UFO show, but they're not called UFOs anymore. They're called something else, aren't they? Is it UAP or what's the... Oh, God. This is rubbish listening because I can't even remember what the thing's called. Yeah, it's got they've got a different name. But anyway, I'll find that out while you're
well, obviously, when Mark, you asked me and others to watch said show, I did, and my views on it were different to yours. Me and Matt talked about it last week. Matt, you was in the same fault as mine with regards to them potentially being stone cold liars. Mark,
that's the extreme definition.
Mark, you have got a right to reply. So tell us your thoughts.
I think it was the sort of implication that I was sort of a X-Files watching sort of basement dweller that was sort of like, oh, as you heard about the aliens, that is definitely real. Which that wasn't my point. My point
we can hear your tinfoil rustling over the microphone.
Yeah, well, exactly. And my keep watching the skies, I want to believe posters. My point was that I when Matt said that he didn't believe in that UFOs had visited Earth, I'm the same. I don't, that seems highly improbable. But my point was that these people have had this experience, and apart from them being stone cold liars, rolling in millions of pounds of Netflix money, I was thinking, well, so you say sort of, if that's not the case, let's just say they're saying the truth. They might, but they've experienced something and they believe they're telling the truth. So, there are lots of examples of sort of mass delusions and, weird phenomena happening that is not aliens. And my point was not, oh, this is definitely aliens. It was more that if that probably isn't aliens, what could it have been? And then you were talking about your example, which again was true, about when people see things and they don't know what it is, that they can have their gaps filled. Oh, did you know that light in the sky was? And you think, oh yeah, it was. And you talk about if you two were in London and you saw a bright light and then you saw on the news it was aliens, you might believe it was aliens. Yeah. But my view would have been, if you were both in London and you saw that bright light and then someone else in Manchester saw that bright light and something weird happened and they lost a bit of time, what would be the reason for that? Not that they were abducted and experimented on and and all things like that, but what could it be? I mean, I know during those sort of times it was very sort of Cold War and lights in the sky and Russians and all that sort of paranoia and things like that, but it was just interesting. It was just interesting to think, if it's not aliens, which it probably isn't, and I don't believe they're lying, what could it be? So I was after intelligent theories, James Steele, and that's not what I got.
Oh God!
Well,
on that bombshell.
There's 2 points. There's 2 points here. There's 2 points I've got here. One, you're right. There's something actually that my sister raised. Shout out to my sister Kerry. she mentioned something about the Mandela effect, which I didn't know anything about, but reading further into it is to do with that things that you've seen that you might mistake for other things, or
Yeah.
or almost convince yourself that you've seen what you thought you saw, if that makes sense. But also something that I think Matt's also spoken to someone else, and I've spoken to someone else about it, and just the fact that if there was life on another planet somewhere that had the same conditions or livable conditions like Earth, which people who are experts in that field
I mean, the universe is big, right?
Exactly.
The universe is
Yeah,
pretty
they
big.
reckon.
Yeah.
I mean,
definitely.
the experts reckon it could be in the hundreds of thousands that there are planets the same as us, or with certainly similar conditions. But the other aspect is that these living forms, if there are that out there, which I am more in agreement with, that there is probably living form outside in the universe, is that they would have needed to have discovered how to travel a way that we haven't even worked out yet. And that's not to say that's impossible, but my point is if you're looking at the probability of it either being that these people have got together and thought this would be a good story to put in a TV show or to sell and then someone will pick it up, or the possibility of alien life forms being able to travel, what do they call it? Is it interstellar?
Between.
If they're able to do that, what's the higher chance, them being liars or the other option? And for me,
No, but they're not the only two options.
Well, no, there's not. They're not. But my point was at the time that for me was my thoughts on it.
And
Whether
just to
that's
add
right
to
or
that,
wrong.
so the nearest equivalent to us is Proxima Centauri B, is the name of the planet.
Lovely planet.
And that is located approximately 4.2 light years away. So I'm trying.
It's pretty far, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a commute. It's a hell of a commute. But my point is that but it's probably not. It's probably not aliens. It's probably not. But if it wasn't that, what could it have been? And that's not me leading someone to say, oh, it's definitely aliens. Who knows what? And when I say the American government, again, that sounds mad, but I don't mean it like, oh, they've all got a plan. I'm just saying, who knows what was going on? Something happened to those people. Apart from them outright lying, something happened, and I just thought it'd be interesting to know what it was.
Yeah.
So that's my right reply to that.
I was saying to James before we started this, in sort of influence from talking about this last week, I was looking on Amazon Prime, and there was a program specifically about UFOs and so on, which I thought that'd be interesting to watch, leading on from what we was discussing and so on. And what I felt was interesting, linked to what we was talking about last week, actually, Tom DeLonge, who we spoke about, is set up or is involved with this group that is trying to. It seems like they're trying to sort of legitimize the whole scene as such, and it's him and it's lots of people that have worked in the military or worked in the Air Force and been on the inside as such of a lot of these things. And they're sort of pooling their resources to investigate what those things actually are. And I think they were one of the people that campaigned. There was a recent thing where they got the US government to admit, basically, not that that's an alien or that's a spaceship as such, on a recording from a fighter jet, I think it was that they admitted it was a UFO, or should I say that I've found the term UAP, which is an unidentified aerial phenomena. So they admitted that we ain't got a clue what this thing is. And it fits into the in this particular program, they were calling them Tic Tacs, because it's the shape is basically a shape for Tic Tac that you see. It's like this white light, and that's a common thing that people have seen or have said they've seen. But I don't know. I just think that part of this sort of stuff, and the weird thing. Sorry, just to add to that, the weird thing that I found, I think I was getting the right sort of interpretation of what these people were saying. The grassroots people that were looking into UFOs, and there was a lady on there who was hosting the show, and they were going around and talking to people that had seen these things, these unexplained things. They sort of frowned a bit upon this group, like the military group as such, because it was almost like, well, almost what have they got to hide as such? There was too much connection to the man, I guess, and it was more, well, they're on the inside. They must have some sort of agenda, whereas we're doing it to get the truth to the people. But, yeah. No real point to that. I just thought that was quite an interesting, perspective from the inside. Yeah.
No, there is a point to that because it when people sort of can go down that route of wanting to have confirmation bias, right? So the more things they find, they because they want to believe it, and then again, I think you touched on this before, and then that leads into other things because obviously governments have lied in the past. People then that think, oh well, what else are they lying about? And then that's where you get Area 51 and all those kind of things, and the Illuminati and all things like that. So it can sometimes be, you can have a skepticism and an interest, and then it can be the thin end of a wedge where it goes into even more deeper. Yeah. The 5G masks are giving you coronavirus sort of feel.
We might touch on that a bit later, maybe.
Oh right.
But just one more point to finish up on this is, Matt, you found another bit of information about the Unsolved Mysteries show, didn't you?
Which did you share?
I haven't actually shared it with Mark, no.
Can just say Mark asked him to share this with you about Thursday last week. So, but on because of the nature of the program and again this sort of like grassroots investigations and so on, the producers of the program on Netflix, one of the two, had a lot of information that they didn't include in the show for whatever reason. They couldn't fit it into the programs they made. So they've made that information available. So if you're so inclined that you want to do your own further investigations on the things that have been discussed, there's I think there's video interviews, there's extra documentation and all bits and pieces like that. So you can download those, you can have a look through them, and again you could, which I think is a really cool thing, you can then add to what you learned from the program and continue to make your own judgment as to what you think and whether you can add more to the discussion.
Especially, I think, because a lot of them, are they're murder cases, aren't they? They're missing people cases. So I suppose they actually want people to come up with more information.
It's beneficial, isn't it? Yeah.
The reason why I didn't share it is because after watching it, it does actually confirm that they were aliens. So, so it just ruined my point, really.
But can I just say one more thing on this, because it is a very interesting thing. One of the things in this program I was watching yesterday, which this conversation in a way sort of confirms it to a certain extent, that the investigators were saying that very few people will have come forward for this, so they would just find why only a small group, essentially, of people have discussed a lot of these sightings and things like that, because of the ridicule. And that's what they said is that, people, there may be people that have seen things, there may have been people that have been concerned or whatever, regarding what they have seen, but because as society it's sort of shunned, that was how they justified. And they said, well, lots of people have seen more, but they fear they're going to be ridiculed, so they're not going to speak out.
Well, we've got a returning segment now. We started it last week. This week, big thanks to listener of the show, Ryan Howard, who has created a jingle for this segment, which we'll play right now. Question mark. So, Mark, this is your segment. Question mark. What's your question?
The question mark sounds like you're either asking me, but you're not. I'm asking you the questions, right?
Yeah. This week.
this
Come
week.
on, that is the best we could do for a name. You can't overemphasize it.
My question is based on the news the other week, which I did send to James, about Fallout being made into a TV show by the people that make Westworld.
Mm.
And my question is, what's the point? because when you think about all the computer games that have turned into TV shows or films, or the films that have turned into games, I mean, 95% of the time, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the new Tomb Raider film. I went to see it and I quite enjoyed it, but no one really seemed bothered about it. It didn't, wasn't critically acclaimed. It wasn't the audience didn't seem to go. So I just wonder, because a game exists, like they're going to do a Gears of War film. I keep hearing about. Now they're doing an Uncharted film with Tom Holland as the lead. So I just think when games are already quite cinematic, and they've already got an audience, and they're already making millions of pounds, and with the history of the transition, I just wonder why would people do that? I don't know what your thoughts are.
Well, my thoughts are, being a avid FIFA player.
FIFA
You
movie.
wait for the
It's
film.
going to be amazing.
The film, the Bend It
Or
Like
Football
Beckham
Manager,
was the
the
closest thing.
dots.
Football
Yeah.
Dots on the
Manager
screen.
movie.
As a
Oh.
movie. Wow. Being one who hasn't played Fallout, could it be that people like me could see that film, not having any prior knowledge to the game, and go, "Oh, this looks
That's
really
a
good.
film.
I wonder what the game's like," because it may have a bit of a switch. I'm guessing there's a broader audience than me that haven't played it. Do you know what I mean? Like most of you guys that I know have played it, but I know the concept of the game, but
because you didn't play the game, that might indicate that you don't really care about that kind of thing. I mean, maybe just miss you, whatever. So would you go and see it anyway? I think that's kind of the...
Well, I'd say yes, because watching a film in comparison to playing a type of game, yes, I watch football and I play football games, but I still watch other things outside of that. Do you know what I mean? Like I may not play all the different types of games because I'm not as good at them games or whatever, but it doesn't mean watching a film should influence that, I don't think. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah, so I'm in Mark's sort of camp with this. It's that historically there have been so many bad sort of crossovers to films, and I think a lot of film companies look at it in a way, look at it as like any cultural phenomenon. Like they'll look at something and think, wow, that's really big, that's really popular. A lot of people like that. Let's make a film about it, or let's make a whatever, a book about it, or let's even big films being turned into games don't often work for whatever reason, because you're losing the magic or the components that made it a good thing in the first place. A game is good because of the interaction. A game is good because of the experiences you have in it, and you feel like you live in it. Whereas as soon as you're then translating that to a film, it's a passive experience, and often they try and change a lot of it to fit more into a movie, and then again you're just chipping away at the essence of the thing. And if you think that like they made a Prince of Persia movie, I think wasn't there a Warcraft one or something sort of a few years ago? Tomb Raider, I've never seen any of the films, but I think the problem with those ones is they sort of missed the boat. Like Tomb Raider was huge in the mid-late 90s, I think it was, wasn't it? But then making films now on Tomb Raider, I know they still make the games, but it's not the property it used to be. And that like Resident Evil, I think, didn't they make Resident Evil films? And
there's about 8 of them, isn't there? Or
so many things that have crossed over. Weirdly, one that I've seen that sort of works in a weird way, they made an Angry Birds movie, but like the nature of Angry Birds, but with that they probably did it in the right ways. It wasn't we're going to make a movie about birds fling themselves at pigs. It was, well, they're the birds and they're the pigs and they're sort of rivals, and we'll make a film out of the characters, and it was And I guess then they had a bit more of a blank canvas because the birds and the pigs didn't do anything apart, like didn't say anything or whatever, so they could adapt it more into a film and the kids love it. But even thinking about Street Fighter, that was terrible. And that Super Mario, they made a film out of that.
Well, I was just going to say, you
so
recently
many.
saw Sonic, didn't you?
Yeah, actually, Sonic is an exception to that rule as well.
Yeah.
But I guess is that the case that Sonic again was Sonic didn't really have a personality in terms of the game itself. So they then added the personality to it. But even the film, I think the film is a bit of a reach in terms of Sonic. I think has been adopted, and he's got these magic rings that he opens like portals up with. That's what he uses the rings for. And he ends up in a sleepy little town, and the sheriff befriends him. So I mean, it's not the relation to the game is so distant, but it's an enjoyable film. It's a well done film.
Do you think as well, with Sonic being such a classic game? I mean, that would have been out. When was the first Sonic out? Probably
91.
91 was it?
91. The Mega Drive came out, wasn't it?
Yeah. So do you think because that game has been around for so long, all that's doing really is bringing new, younger eyes onto the character in the game, and then potentially you've got another wave if you bring out a new game, depending on how you promote it after that.
I suppose with Sonic as well, certain things like that. There have been lots of Sonic TV shows as well. So unless you've got kids or necessarily are into that sort of thing, you probably would miss it. But there have been lots of different spin-offs, and I guess Sonic is still. They still make Sonic games, and I think they're relatively successful in that. So there's a bit more there, but yeah, I don't see it works. It's like I say, it's the same as anything you get into. It's like skateboarding was cool for a while, or skateboarding is cool as an underground thing, and people get into skateboarding, but it doesn't mean that they want to buy a T-shirt from Tesco's that says skateboarding on it, because they're not cool. And that's sort of the way I see it. Or skateboarding cereal, just because you do it, you don't want everything.
But then that's it, isn't it? Is it purely just a very cynical money making scheme? People like Giz War. Let's just make a film on it, and that's a shame, then, isn't it? Because actually, and then that's quite short sighted, actually, because in the long run, it would make them more money were they to make something. Something decent. But also the other way around, I can't think of many games that have come from films that are really good. The only one I can think of is The Path of Neo, which was like all three of the films all in one. So it wasn't really based on one film.
Matrix films.
Yeah.
No, I don't remember.
That's the only one I can think. The rest have all been quite mediocre. So it seems like a strange.
Yeah.
A strange idea to say, well, we'll make a game of this, but we won't. But we'll sort of, I don't know, make a rubbish version. I
guess it really depends how much you invest, because if it's low budget and then it takes off, then there's potential for you to then
it's risk,
risk and reward, isn't it? So with any sort of movie franchise, if that's what it's going to be. It really depends on that initial outlay to income, I guess, from viewers. But it is an interesting.
But if you think of going the other way, just going back to your question, Mark, about ones that have gone from a movie to a game that have worked. One I used to love on the arcade was RoboCop. Arcade game was amazing. It was just like a side-scrolling thing, and you could shoot Ed 209 and all that. But one thing that works on so many levels is Star Wars, I guess. But Star Wars again is something that
they've had a checkered history of good Star Wars computer games, haven't they?
It's true, but I guess Star Wars is sort of bigger than the films now, as such. It's more of a
brand.
Franchise. I guess it is. It's a brand. It's a franchise. There have been so many books, and there's all the sort of I guess like Marvel as well, isn't it? But even you're right, Mark. That like a lot of the Star Wars games have been a bit shoddy. But you think of Marvel, that doesn't translate that well, often into games. And apart from the Spider-Man game, I think was very good, wasn't it, and things like that. But yeah,
Just for the record, FIFA playing guy had that RoboCop game. Just saying.
did you?
I did. It was a great game. Anyway,
I had Terminator 2 on Game Boy as well, which was again side-scrolling, and you rode the motorbike and that. And this is the original black and white Game Boy, so it's like, you could just about make out what was what. Really good game though.
Well, while we're talking about movies, we have had a question sent in to us this week from Corey Lawson. It's a great question as well, which I really struggle. I know you did, Matt. Struggled with answers.
Tough one
for this. What Corey wanted to know this week was what films have we seen that were, say, good the first time we saw them, and then when we watched them again afterwards weren't quite as good, and then the opposite, ones that we thought were rubbish or bad when we saw them the first time round, and we enjoyed them a lot more second time round.
Mark, you should go first as your special guest, I think.
Thank you. So the one I hated when I saw it the first time was The Last Jedi, episode 8. I think it speaks a lot to sort of fandoms at the moment that have sort of written the scripts in their head before they see the film.
Yeah.
Because when I went to see that, obviously after Force Awakens, I knew everything that was going to happen in the film. I knew everything, I knew what was going to happen next. I knew, well, that will probably happen. This will probably happen. And then when you see The Last Jedi, and I know it's divisive among Star Wars fans for lots and lots of different reasons, it was totally not what anyone expected. And so in some ways, that's either a really good thing, because obviously, sometimes you want to go and be, shocked or learn something, or that didn't, that was unexpected. Or it's just like, well, they've just completely destroyed everything that happened before. So when I went in and saw it, after I saw it, I was like, well, that was awful. That was terrible. They've done some really bad things there, blah, 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 blah. And then when I saw it again, and I watched it a bit more dispassionately, and not so much like, this is not what I would thought was going to happen. This is not my script. When I watched it again, I realized, there were some really, really good parts. I could see what they were doing. I could see the sort of the aim of the characters and what the writers and directors trying to do. And I also think because there was so much about it, so many things written about it on Twitter and stuff, that once you perhaps took on board some of those different perspectives, it made the film a more enjoyable experience. I still don't. I mean, it's not perfect. I watched all the Star Wars again just recently, and none of them are obviously perfect, but they're all of them have got some good things. And I think that The Last Jedi as well has some really strong moments. So yeah. So once you get over the geek rage of things not being how you expected, then it was actually a really enjoyable film.
It's interesting you say that. That was one that was potentially going to be my answer for very similar reasons. I think for me with that film, you ended The Force Awakens and Luke turns up. And you think, I've said this before on the podcast. You think, Luke's going to come, he's going to sort everything out. He's the man. And then for the whole film, he's just whining. And I but also it feels, you're right, there's some amazing scenes. Watching it again at home, some of the scenes in it are absolutely incredible. True Star Wars scenes, in their scale and everything. But they're just these really odd bits in between that just don't seem to fit. The bit they always go back to is when Luke milks that thing. Like, I just think, why did I need to see that? That's just weird.
I suppose because I suppose, I mean, I know this is not really about this, but I suppose he's basically gone a bit feral. Luke is. He has. I mean, because Yoda's a bit mad, right? So Yoda's a bit.
That's true. That's true.
So I think
that is eccentric. Yeah.
But I mean, I think Mark Hamill said this himself. That's not what he saw Luke as. Luke would always be a hero. I think Mark Hamill had said that in his version, Luke could have saved Han just before he dies. So, but then that's it, isn't it? Just because that's what you wanted or what you think it is.
That's it. Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Yeah. Good choice.
What's your one from good first time and then not so good second?
Uh, when I went to see The Matrix 2, I really, really enjoyed it. So it's Revelations, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I thought it was really, really clever, and I thought it had, it has that big long truck sequence, on the freeway or the motorway.
Yeah.
It's all that kind of stuff. The architect at the end talking his nonsense. I was really, really hooked. Really, really hooked. Now I don't know if number 2 suffers because I know what's coming in number 3 and how crushingly awful number 3 was. But I think what I watched number 2 just recently, and it's just, it's not a patch on number 1, obviously. So I think when I watched it, because I liked it because it's a sort of a twist at the end of number 2, and I enjoyed that. But then when I watched it again, you think, well, that's not enough, is it? Just having sort of that twist at the end, and the car chase scene. There's not actually that much going on in that film, which is a shame because I do like it, and I'm looking forward to the 4th one. But yeah, so I was well hyped on Matrix 2 for a long time, wearing the leather jackets and everything, and then and then when tried to run up walls, and then so I think 2 was bad because it sits between obviously like a phenomenal first film and a dire third film. But I'm annoyed at myself that I really liked the second one.
Do you know what's interesting? You saying that, Mark? I'll touch upon. We'll go over yours next, Matt. But it's interesting because I know what Matt's one is.
All right.
And my one, and I won't tell you what it is right now, but is also a sequel.
Oh, right.
I wonder whether one of the big things about that is because you're so hyped up for a film after a great first one.
Yeah.
And then when you watch it that first time, it is good because it's the second one of that great film that you watch.
Yeah.
And it's not until you watch it again and you go, you know what, actually, that's great. But I mean, Matt, you can pick up from here. So we'll start. Should we start the other way around for you, Matt?
I would like to. As it's very relevant in this situation. My selection for a film I liked and then didn't is exactly the same film. The second Matrix film.
Oh wow!
I remember, similar to what you said, I think there'd been quite a wait, hadn't there? I can't remember how many years between the two, and sort of having seen the Matrix, loved the Matrix, such an incredible film, and then I wouldn't see it at the follow up at the cinema. And coming out in that cinema thinking, wow, that was incredible. I can't believe how good that was. Just my mind's going in all different places. And then, like you said, you then take a bit of a step back and think, oh, God, they're like, what were they talking about? Because it is, I must admit, it's been a while since I've seen it, but it's when they're talking about, like, it's they have to find the key master or the blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And there seems to be all these characters that are suddenly piling into this thing. And
Well, they try to explain all the different phenomena, don't they? So they try to explain ghosts, and they try to explain werewolves, and they try to explain vampires, all because they're all sort of dud programs of the Matrix.
Yeah.
And it's just,
But seeing the Matrix, I watched the Matrix fairly recently, and again had been a good few years since I watched it. Incredible. Still, so some of the effects now are less spectacular than they were before, but it's a solid film. Really.
I mean, I think one that and a couple of other films had a real impact on me. I think, especially growing up. Yeah, I think it was really, really important. Let's hope number 4 is better.
Well, I've not got. I feel number 4 will go in the same way as the fourth Indiana Jones in my mind, because I remember seeing that in the cinema, thinking, oh, it's great, and then just seeing like an old man, and I know he's supposed to be old in it, but Harrison Ford had lost his sort of cool exterior that he had with Indiana Jones. But I get it, him being Han Solo old, I think worked perfectly as a character, but just Indiana Jones didn't. But yeah, so it's funny you picked the same one. The one that I disliked first and then liked afterwards, I found really difficult to think of. But what I settled for in the end was Space Jam as a film, because when Space Jam came out, I had absolutely no interest in seeing it. So it just didn't appeal to me at the time, and really wasn't interested in it. I'd read a book called No Logo by Naomi Klein, which is a very well-known book about marketing, and it absolutely slates it in that particular book. So again, I was because of the continual product placement in that children's film, and there's a bit where Michael Jordan is laying on the bed in his hotel room, and his manager comes in and says, "Oh, why don't you get up and drink some Mountain Dew and get a Big Mac and blah blah." And it's just so obvious, like how many brands can you fit into it? But it's just crazy. But having watched it in recent years, I love it. Like just the it's just such an enjoyable film for what it is. It's not perfect, but it's great. I can watch it again and again now.
Did you watch it after watching the docuseries on
Last
Netflix?
Dance? No. I saw it probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that, because it was on a Sunday afternoon on TV, and watched it and thought, actually, this is all right. But again, I don't know whether that's, there could be different factors in that. Is it more now, looking back at it, because it's an older film, is there more the nostalgia element to it that appeals to me more than it did then when it was actually out? Maybe, there could be that element to it as well. But
I mean, or maybe you're just so indoctrinated by capitalism now that you're just product placement's fine.
Yeah.
Give me more product placement.
I got a Big Mac straight up.
Well, like you, Matt, I really struggled with film that I didn't enjoy the first time into the second time. I started even scratching around at TV shows because I thought, I can't think of any film.
Adverts.
However,
love that Hovis advert.
Yeah, that's the one. But I did settle on one that I remember watching. I think I watched it too young and didn't enjoy it for what it was, and that was Donnie Darko. Watched it. I can't remember what year that came out. Mark, you probably know that better than me.
That's a really good one. I'd say 2000.
Well,
one a minute. You talk. 2001.
Oh,
right. So, I mean, I remember watching it and just not having a clue what was going on, and everyone had raved about it, and I thought, I have no idea what's going on here. And it weren't until I was a little bit older and I watched it again, and I just thought it was incredible.
How old were you when you watched it the first time? Because it is quite a teen, angsty sort of. So were you?
How old were you in 2001? Was it?
Well, we were 15, weren't we?
15. Yeah. So I mean, it probably just wasn't the right. At that time for me, it was probably just that little bit too much.
You grew up a lot from 15 to 17 though, James. So
what are you trying to get here?
I'm just saying, you've matured well.
My point is, I enjoyed it more the second time. The one that for me was good, and again, I touched upon it earlier, it's a sequel, is one that I actually saw with you, Mark, and we actually went to the premiere to see this film, and that was Anchorman 2. Anchorman 2. We went to the actual premiere in London.
Yeah, that was a great night.
It was a great night. Although Matt, you will remember me and Mark actually dressed up because it was like a fancy dress, and you had to dress up as a character from there.
Yeah.
I actually grew my moustache specifically for that. We got wigs, and someone asked me if I'd come as Borat. So maybe I'm still scarred from this, but the movie itself, I remember watching it, and it was really funny, haha. And it's not till I've watched it a few times since then, and every time I've gone, this is like a poor version of the first one. Like they didn't really try, although it was a modern day version of it, because I think, how many years had it been? 10
years? Must have been about 10 years.
And that again for me was probably one of the problems. The humour that you had from the 10 years prior on the first one, it just hadn't got that much better, because it was almost like they were still set in the past, but it was just a weird concept. But
I mean, also the night we went to see it, it was the premiere, wasn't it? Because obviously, Will Ferrell was there, Paul Rudd was there, Christine Applegate? Was she?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Anyway, they was, but so it was a proper real premiere, but also it was sponsored by Jameson's whiskey,
and we were
and
pretty
so
drunk.
and it was free whiskey pretty much, as far as I remember, at least a couple of free whiskeys. So maybe you were just hyped up on the actual night. We were just giddy, yeah. But no, that's a really good shout, because I think I've only watched bits of it in the sequel after it, and yeah, you're right. It just doesn't seem right or feel right, does it? So yeah, that's a good shout.
Great question sent in from Corey there. That one really got us thinking on that one. So in other news that I've seen today, and it goes a little bit political, but we won't go too hard on that because that's not what we're about. The government have actually done a U-turn in the UK on, I'm assuming, partnering up with China in 5G with Huawei. And I just wanted to know your thoughts on that, because I have no clue why we're not. Because annoyingly, I mean, I've been on Samsung mobiles for a few years now, probably 3 or 4 years. And my next phone I was looking at were Huawei phones. Yeah. So does this mean I shouldn't be getting a Huawei phone now?
Well, see, I've had Huawei phone in the past. My wife's got one currently. They're fantastic. The issue with the network gear, basically, they make the best networking gear, particularly for 5G, as far as I understand. Which is why the UK was going to partner with them. And as far as I know, a lot of our telecommunications stuff is already on it. I may be, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we currently use a lot of their stuff anyway, because it's good stuff. I think my opinion in it, a lot of this pressure has come from the US, because the US, with the tensions between them and China, are sort of moving away from a lot of things that are manufactured by them. I think that their justification is that the head of Huawei has some sort of connection with the Chinese government, so they're basically saying that it has the potential to spy on the citizens of another country. And with the phones that they manufacture, they've so in a way forced, or not forced maybe, but as a result of the pressure that the US government has been putting on Huawei as a company, or US companies generally with China, Google has withdrawn its services on their phones. So all newer phones use their own Huawei OS, and their own store and things like that. You can still, I believe, get the apps like Facebook and those sort of things if you want it, but Google services aren't available on those phones. So that's the sort of danger that you would have as such. If you got one of their phones, you may be limited. It will do everything you want it to do, but it may be limited in the future in terms of services and updates to Android, because Android is a Google-owned business. So yeah, I think their approach has been just to create your own operating system, and if you buy their phone, you will be using their product in the same way as if you bought a Nokia in the olden days. It was just Nokia software, and there wasn't that sort of shared software that we're used to now.
Right. I mean, I think also the 5G stuff isn't necessarily just for people with mobile phones that want to sort of look at YouTube. I think 5G was going to be, I mean, apparently integrated into every single sort of business and hospital and power station and everything like that. So that potentially, I mean, Huawei say that they're a private company and they've got nothing to do with the Chinese government. But obviously, that's what they might have been told to say by the Chinese government. So if you were to let Huawei in, they'd be able to access every single facet of British life. I mean, including some nuclear power stations. I mean, although I think they're already doing that with the Chinese anyway. But it is interesting that it's Huawei, because obviously Google and Facebook have been doing some very dodgy things and mining data, and I know all this GDPR stuff recently has probably come from out of that. So it seems strange that it's Huawei is the one. I mean, and also we've got lots of other problems with China to do with Hong Kong at the moment as well. China are the second biggest economic power in the world. So it does seem. I agree with you, Matt. I think it is more because Donald Trump doesn't like China that perhaps we've come out a bit more, because they said it's gonna put everything back years and years, and also they won't actually get rid of Huawei till 2027, 7 years time. So
well,
it's very odd.
If Donald Trump doesn't like China, he probably won't like you then, Matt, because you've just bought a new phone which is Chinese branded.
Exactly. But just my final note on what we was just talking about. As Mark said, I think the way I look at it, it's very odd in that you got these huge American businesses that have are integrated with so many services now, so many different areas of life, so many people use them, and they spy on you constantly, and they retain information from you constantly, and there is documented evidence that, say for example, you download an app that may be completely innocent, as you think it may be, that changes your face or whatever it may be. A lot of those apps take information from you, whether it be location data, whether it be access to your camera, and all of these different things. And there are certain companies out there that aggregate that data, and what they then do is create a sort of a fingerprint almost of you as a user. So they know where you work, they know where you live, they know where you shop, and they know who you bank with, they know where everything regarding your life does. And they have your face quite often. And it's insane, so it's not whether I was going to say it's not really a thing of whether you agree with it or not, but just to give an example of, there are so many services out there that do exactly the same thing, and TikTok at the moment is coming under scrutiny because of the way it accesses your data, and I think it does do certain things which are a bit suspicious. But it's one of those things that it seems like a government or people at large are fine with. Well, it's okay if they do that to me, but oh God, we don't want a mask made by a Chinese company because that's really terrible. Well, you're really sharing your data, regardless, and that unfortunately is whether you agree with it or not, it is almost a part of using these free services that that's your that's how you pay. It's with your identity more than anything else.
Yeah, if it's free, you're the product.
Yeah, exactly that. But in regards to I bought a phone. I'd for many years been an Android user. I convinced James to move over to Android, and James moved over to Android, and
then he left.
So I bought. I was having a look on the market, and I'll be honest, I'd had my phone for 4 years. Absolutely loved my iPhone, but the comparison of price and performance just didn't add up staying with Apple. I've got a very good deal with my mobile network, so they won't offer me a decent upgrade. I don't want to pay a load a month. I'd rather just buy a phone. And I was able to get it's a company called Realme, which isn't one I'd heard of before, but they're basically it's a Shenzhen sort of manufacturer in China. That's their sort of trading name as such. It's a UK model. When I signed up for the phone, it's called the GDPR stuff, and that it's made for the UK market. But it's got sort of an 8-core processor. It's got a 64 meg camera on it. It's got 4 cameras on the back, 1 on the front, a 90 hertz screen, 128 gig storage, which is expandable as well. It's phenomenal. And it cost me 270 quid with it SIM free. You know, so in comparison to looking at an iPhone or whatever for a similar cost, even looking at Samsungs and things of a similar cost, you're looking at almost 4 times that. Whereas that does everything that you could possibly want. So, you know, it's fantastic.
Do you think there's enough knowledge from these smaller companies? I don't know the size of Realme, but
No,
I mean, we looked at this probably a couple of years ago when I was looking at upgrading, and I didn't even realise like the laptop that I use, Asus, they do their own mobile phones. I wouldn't have even known that if I hadn't have stumbled across it. And it's when you start looking into actually buying a phone outright rather than and the ones that you always think of are Samsungs usually and iPhones. And they're extortionate on buying them outright. We had a friend of ours who used to always do that, didn't he? Every time he'd buy the new model.
Just so then he £800 or whatever.
800. I mean, he had more money than sense, but I hope he's listening. He's but yeah, it's. I think people are starting to be a bit more clued up now on these sorts of things.
It's the first time, I think, and I've always been interested in the sort of technology side of things, but this time I think buying a phone and I was able to do it in this way. I bought a phone in the same way as I would a computer. And the spec of that phone is the same as a laptop, basically. You know, it's incredible what it can do and so on. But it was that, you know, I shopped around, I had a look, I knew what I wanted in my mind in terms of like what the base level performance on the base level of the services and features it offered. And yeah, that ticked all the boxes. But again, there was that leap of faith of, I don't know who this company is. I've never heard of them before, and you see on Amazon and that there are loads of different like no brand Android phones that you can get for about 50 quid or whatever. But these seemed like a decent company, and like the battery on that, I charged that up on Sunday, and today's the first time I'm charging it. It's incredible, and that's using Spotify, streaming music, or just using it normally. Amazing, something like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if shout out to Realme, if you want to send us some free merch, then
nice.
Please do.
Yeah,
we'll mention you again. And any other independent mobile phone brands.
If anyone else would like to give anyone,
if anyone's got any free stuff that they want to send us,
we will mention you. I mean, I did mention Hovis earlier on, so if you get a massive delivery of bread,
send
just one loaf.
Bread.
Just one loaf.
Put in the chest freezer.
Anyway, I think that's the end of This Week in Metropolis. Not for good, just this week. And Mark, it's been a pleasure having you on, as always.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Come on again. Again, if you want to keep updated on what's going on our show, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter at This Week in Metropolis. Other than that, we will be back next week with a top 5 sent in to us for next week. So, Matt, I'll send you that and you have to get your thinking head on.
Excellent. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
And goodbye.
Listening transmission over.